I can't believe it's been a year since I got this camera. Got the Nikon ZF when it was released, so it is more than a year. And so far I am glad I did. The camera after 1 year is just like new. My X-T5 after a year had some rubber problems, the paint was off in many places and one of the dials broke and I had to send it back to Fujifilm for repairs. The Nikon ZF has no scratch and I used it to record B-roll for the channel, some projects for video and my travel photography weekly, maybe daily since I got it, and it looks like new. No problems with the display hinge, it's a big hinge, it should last forever. Don't worry, I haven't changed systems or anything like that. I still use Fujifilm cameras, the X-T5 and X-E4. I am disappointed in Fujifilm, and not because they didn't fix the autofocus and made it worse with firmware updates, it is because they ignored us for such a long time. This is not going to be a very technical review of the camera, but I am going to talk about low light, image quality and some video specs because I already did the technical videos, including comparing the camera with the X-T5. I know, different categories, but I had to do it. It was like an itch. So if that is what you're looking for, watch my older videos because this is about what I think about the camera 1 year later. My name is Andrei Dima, I'm a professional travel photographer and I've been using Nikon cameras for more than 10 years. And when Nikon announced this camera, I was super excited to get one because I wanted something with a vintage look from Nikon. And I wasn't expecting the Z6 III because I don't do weddings and events. I wanted this camera for street photography and maybe some landscape, but for that I use a different camera. I also wanted it to be a good video camera and it turned out to be very good, especially the autofocus. So I sold my dear Fujifilm X-H2S because it became problematic firmware by firmware. I know Fujifilm released a firmware that fixes autofocus recently, but this was a long time ago. Now, the only thing I miss in this camera is a higher resolution, because if it had that, I would have sold my landscape camera and used this one all the time. I used a lot the Nikon D850 and loved that camera, but I had to change to something smaller. I hope Nikon will make a ZF-S with the 45 megapixel sensor. I would buy that in a heartbeat, or a rangefinder style camera with a higher megapixel sensor. 24 megapixels is plenty, but sometimes for street photography you need to crop a bit. That is where I miss the extra resolution on this camera. Otherwise, I just love the images I get, the colors, the dynamic range and the low light results. And as I said in previous videos, denoising Nikon files in Lightroom is amazing compared to Fujifilm files. The IBIS is great for photo and video, a thing not many people talk about, and the thing that made me worry about the build of the camera was the lack of a sensor lock. So far, no problems, went hiking with it, on an off-road trip and many more situations where the sensor could have been affected. And nothing happened so far. I found this late about the Nikon ZF, but it seems it has dual native ISO in N-Log. You won't see any difference when you shoot normally, but it is a nice feature to have. What I miss when it comes to video is the ability to record in OpenGate. It's a great option to have for reframing. I thought they will add it by now in a firmware update. This is a thing that I wanted more from Nikon for this camera. Firmware updates, small additions, surprises like they did with the Z9 and Z8. Maybe soon. Nikon buying red gave us some nice free LUTs we can use with the N-Log in the Nikon ZF that can give some pretty good looking results. The video autofocus is very good, it is smooth and accurate even with small lenses and stepping motors. I hope Fujifilm will improve the AF one day to be as good as the one on Nikon cameras. Let's talk about the handling of this camera. It got so much hate because it doesn't have a grip. This is not that type of a camera. Go get a Z6 III or buy a grip as I did. The best one I found for me is the newer version 2 because it has a thumb rest, but I use the grip only 50% of the time with heavier lenses. Otherwise, I love using the camera without a grip when I use smaller lenses, and the comfortable neck strap reminds me of my film days, and this is the appeal of this camera. Nostalgia for those of us that used Nikon film cameras or Canon or whatever, and a good starting point for younger people that want a similar experience but with modern digital features. And the price of the camera now is amazing. I would get this now over the Fujifilm X-T5 because they are so close in price. When it comes to dials, well, it depends on how you want to use the camera. Let me show you how I use it now. Turn the auto ISO on and set the maximum ISO to 200. Now, when you increase the ISO on the dial, you increase the maximum auto ISO allowed. This way you have auto ISO and you can use the dial to get the analog feel you wanted all along. I know I showed this in previous videos, but it is a good information for newcomers. The battery life is decent, but it can be great if you shoot only RAW. Processing JPEGs in camera is really battery consuming. You can also stop the IBIS when you have plenty of light for your photos. My favorite lenses for the Nikon ZF have changed since my last video. I still prefer the Nikon 40mm f2 and the Viltrox 20mm f2.8, but my new favorite lens that has an aperture ring with clicks is the Meika 55mm f1.8 Pro. Why? Because it has colors similar to my Zeiss 2-Wit 32mm f1.8 for the Fujifilm X mount. Great contrast and micro contrast, making it a great option for the Nikon ZF. It is bigger than other lenses, but it has beautiful image quality. I also use the Viltrox 16mm f1.8 for more demanding projects, and I love using it with the newer grip on the ZF. It also has a very nice aperture ring with clicks. Overall, after a year, I love this camera more and more. Do I miss the Fujifilm JPEG film simulations and recipes on this camera? Well, not really, because I mostly edit RAW files. I love the handling. After you use it for a while, the quirks start to make sense, like the screen, because I use mostly the viewfinder, which is very nice and bright. I know some of you wanted a different screen, but I now enjoy this one. After you set it up as you like, you find that it is a fast camera to use, and I still like that it doesn't have a grip. The dials are so nice to use. My Fujifilm camera feels like a toy compared to the Nikon ZF when it comes to dials and the upper part of the camera. The so-called plastic parts are not really plastic. The Nikon ZF incorporates carbon fiber reinforced polycarbonate in its construction rather than standard plastic. This material is used to improve durability while keeping the camera lightweight. It is a very well built camera for the price. I wish the screen hinge was smaller, but hey, there is no perfect camera. So I love my Nikon ZF. This is a camera I'm not going to sell too soon. Only if they make a higher megapixel one or a rangefinder one. So this is my opinion. And I highly recommend the Nikon ZF to people looking for a full frame SLR inspired camera with great features. Yes, I think this is the best retro camera on the market right now when it comes to quality to price ratio. It's a good thing Nikon made this camera. Maybe it shakes the Fujifilm nest a bit. What do you think about the Nikon ZF? Do you own one? Do you want one? Tell me in the comments below. If this video was helpful, please subscribe, like, and if you want to support the channel even more, use the links in the description at no extra cost to you. Thank you for watching, see you next time.